Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Today, we're going to talk about how to manage emotions with practical tools and skills combined with essential oils. And so, a little bit about me. My name is Brooke Schmidt. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I've had extensive training in relationship dynamics, relational trauma, EMDR, and I'm also trained in the aroma freedom technique, which is basically using essential oils to plow through limiting beliefs. I originally got started with oils in 2014 as a way to support my family's health naturally, and I was really amazed at how well they worked physically. But then I found out that they not only support your physical health, but they support your emotional health as well. So that was really an added bonus. Later, of course, we'll get into how all of that works, but personally, I have found that combining therapy with therapeutic skills and essential oils is a very cool and powerful combination. And so I wanted to offer this class because with everything going on right now, with this coronavirus and being quarantined, I just think that we can all use some support with managing our emotions. And I really believe that this virus has perhaps brought up some undealt with emotions or trauma even, buried emotions that have now surfaced a lot for people. And so I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But there's that big factor along with the fact that there's just a lot of unknowns going on right now. So thank you again for being here. So today what we're going to cover is emotions, of course, what they are, where they might come from, how to identify them. I'm also going to talk about our nervous systems and what we can do to regulate our nervous systems. And I'm a big believer in bringing awareness to our thoughts and feelings and what's happening in our bodies, which essentially is just knowing our own reality. And so you'll hear me talk a lot about consciousness or bringing conscious awareness, basically bringing the unconscious automatic stuff we do to the surface. Really, where life isn't just happening to us or at us, but rather as life happens, we want to be aware of how we are responding. And if this sounds weird or confusing, it should make sense by the time we're done. So if you take just one thing away today, I do believe that the concept of having, that conscious awareness, that one concept alone will produce a lot of change. And so the first part, we are going to be going over a lot of information. And then for the second part, I'm going to go over practical skills you can use. And of course, we'll review a lot of the essential oils that you can use, what they're good for, and which emotions they'll support. And then lastly, we'll go over just all of the therapeutic tools you can use. And so if you have any questions at all, drop them in the comments. And even though this video is recorded, I will answer any questions as quickly as I can in the comments. Or if you have a private question or a situation that you want to ask me about, go ahead and send me a private message. I have included my contact information at the end of this, so feel free to just contact me directly if you want to keep anything kind of private. So first off, we'll talk about getting to know our feelings. You really can't support your emotions if you don't know what you're feeling. So surprisingly, so many people don't know what they're feeling. Their feelings are so automatic that they just kind of go unnoticed. And so we're going to talk about primary emotions, the gifts of all the emotions, because every emotion, even the hard ones, will have a gift to it. And then we'll go over where the emotions are felt in our body, because every emotion will have a physical sensation to it. And one thing to note is that I do use the terms feelings and emotions interchangeably. I think technically feelings are on the inside, like what we're feeling on the inside, and then emotions are the what we are expressing. But for our purposes, I use them interchangeably. So just know that I'm really just talking about the same thing. And then one thing to note is that emotions don't have to be big or consistent, which can be a little confusing, but a part of you can feel, really excited that you're home with your family in quarantine, feel really excited that you don't have to make plans right now. while at the same time, another part of you can feel fear of all the unknowns and what's happening. And then another part of you can even be feeling like pain, knowing that a lot of people are really feeling the negative effects of this, with losing jobs and maybe like less than ideal living situations. And so you can really be feeling all of those things at the same time. And so now we are going to review the emotions chart. So on the far left column, there is a list of your primary emotions. And actually this chart, if you want a copy of this, I will show you how to get that at the end. So just know that if you can get a copy of the emotions chart that I made. But basically in the far left-hand column, these are going to be your primary emotions. And then the middle column, of course, is where you are going to feel the emotions in your body. And then the last column is all of the gifts of the emotions. And so even things like shame and guilt and pain, you know, all of them have a gift to it. Like shame is really knowing your humanity, knowing if you need to contain yourself, and humility. And so it's good to just notice that as well when you're feeling harder emotions. So I like to bring up the where you're feeling it in your body to check in with, does that line up with the actual emotion you're feeling? So for example, I'll have people tell me that they feel very angry. And when I ask where they feel that anger in their body, they'll say, you know, something like, well, I think in my chest or my heart. And so then I'll check in with them and say, well, you know, pain is typically felt in your chest and heart. You know, could that be the core of what you're feeling? They'll usually say something like, you know, now that you mention it, I do feel pain and anger. And so it's good to just line up, where are you feeling the feeling in your body, or what emotion are you feeling, and does that line up with where you're feeling that in your body? So I'll also have people say things like, you know, I feel incredibly fearful about such and such. When I ask, you know, where they feel that in their body, they'll say something like, you know, I've never really thought about it. I don't know where I feel it in my body. So then I'll just say, the next time you feel a lot of fear, or, you know, like if fear comes up for you, just notice where in your body you feel that. They'll usually come back and tell me something like, you know, I did notice that I was feeling fear. I was feeling like a numbing or tingling in my arms and legs, which is where fear is felt. And so this is just to show how sometimes like things just are so automatic for us. So it's really good to, you know, again, bring conscious awareness to where are you feeling that in your body, and does that line up with the actual feeling, and and that sort of thing. So the goal is to notice, you know, like I mentioned, what you're feeling, where you're feeling it in your body, and then what are the thoughts creating the feeling, because every thought will create an emotion. When you're thinking about thoughts creating an emotion, you really want to dig at what's the underlying thought, not just the logistics of what happened. So for example, if my husband says something to me that I perceive as rude, my initial thought might be, I can't believe he's so rude. And that's the thought producing anger. Of course, he never says anything rude at all, but just an example. But underneath the thought of, you know, I can't believe he said that, he's so rude and I'm angry, underneath that, I might be thinking something like, I can't believe he said that, I feel so dismissed. And so that's really the core of like the thought that you're looking for. So when you do this, when you just go through this process, you're, for one, acknowledging what is happening in your body, and that brings conscious awareness to the surface. That alone will. So really getting to know where you're feeling the feeling and really digging in to the thoughts creating the emotion is really one of the first steps at you know, starting to release emotions. And so really quickly, I do like to note the difference between carried or generational emotions. Typically, your own emotions are going to feel manageable. Carried emotions are going to feel overwhelming. These carried emotions are the undealt with emotions that are being passed down from generation to generation and then reenacted by us. So basically, you're feeling the feelings that your parents or caregivers did not deal with. And so just as they are feeling the feelings that their parents or caregivers did not deal with. And so it's knowing that all of us have generational emotions being passed down, and that those feelings will probably feel pretty overwhelming. And so what do you do with this information? You really just want to note the difference. Is this my own emotion or is this a carried emotion? I think it's just really helpful to note that, because when you can start to, again, you're going to get sick of me hearing, saying conscious awareness, but again, when you can just bring awareness, that's when healing really begins. So on this chart, examples of generational emotions or carried emotions, you're going to feel them in different parts of your body. So a carried anger is going to be felt in like your gut, and it'll feel like pressure and rage, whereas your own anger is going to feel, you're going to feel that in your whole body, and it'll actually kind of feel like energizing. And so it's just noticing, the difference. And again, fear, pain, shame, and guilt, all of these emotions, the carried emotions, are going to be felt in a different area than your own emotion. So that's another indicator when you're noticing your feelings, where you're feeling it, and is it carried or is it your own? So an example of a carried emotion could look like this. If you have parents or caregivers that are either outwardly fearful, for example, or not fearful at all, like they should have felt fear but didn't. And so what I mean by that is, like I've had clients tell me things like, as a teenager, as a kid, my parents knew I was doing drugs in my room, but they didn't say anything, or they knew I was sneaking out at night, but when I came home in the morning, nobody said anything. So that would kind of be an example of parents who are not feeling fear. Like you should feel fear if your kid is out all night and you don't know what they're doing. Like there should be some level of fear that you're feeling. So if you have parents who really did not deal with their emotions, and all of us on some level have not dealt with our emotions. So just to note, this is not in any way to blame your parents or say you had bad parenting. It's really just to acknowledge the system of what was going on. Really just to acknowledge, like I said, the difference between carried or generational. But anyway, like the example I just used, when that happens as a child, you then pick up the fear that your parents should have appropriately felt but didn't. So you're essentially just feeling the fear for them. But now as an adult, when fear comes in, you might feel an overwhelming amount of fear. It might feel unmanageable, and you might feel it, in your extremities, like that numbing, tingling, or it could be panic. And just knowing that it's generational can help with releasing that, because you can kind of step outside of it and know, this isn't my feeling. Like some of the fear might be mine, but a lot of it is my parents or grandparents or whoever. Like a lot of it is generational. And so that's really just knowing, this isn't me. This isn't who I am. This isn't my fear. It's also knowing too, thinking back, how did my parents express or caregivers express emotion? And so, it's also knowing, you can think about, did I have parents who were fearful or fearless? Or did I have parents who were outwardly angry? Or did I have parents who raged? And then, if your parents just expressed emotions in that way, there's a good chance you may have picked that up. And so it's kind of just assessing in yourself, like, do I have some of that from childhood? So hopefully that makes sense. That, like I said, you really just want to note the difference. So now we'll talk about children and big emotions. And so, of course, children have no idea how to verbally say things like, I'm angry or I'm having a bad day. And so we need to teach them how to regulate their emotions, and we need to help them learn how to express emotions. So if your child is having a meltdown or a big emotion, feeling heard is really huge. They really just want to know that you hear what they're saying and that you validate what they're saying. And another thing, the calmer that we are, the better. Babies and little kids will actually co-regulate with us. And so as hard as it is sometimes, it's really important that we can remain as calm as we can. If we can remain calm, they will start to calm. And so, like I said, it's really hard to do when they're in the middle of meltdowns, but as much as you can, just remain calm in the middle of their meltdown. Sometimes I think as parents, when we see our kids out of control, we feel like, like emotionally out of control, we feel like we really need to get them under control so that they don't act like this. And, like it can be scary to be like, oh my gosh, are they going to be out of control for forever? Like just, like we kind of panic a little bit. And so it's really just knowing like their big emotions are okay. You will never be able to control a kid, but you can control their environment. So if your child is having a meltdown and they get angry, it's for sure okay to say, being angry is perfectly fine. What's not okay is like hitting your siblings or throwing things. Like those are the things that are not okay. But if you're angry, let's just go, like hit a pillow or punch the couch or, something like that. So you're really just wanting to teach them how to express that. And you're wanting to give them the language to use. So I know I'm guilty of this a lot where I'll say to my kids, like, be sure to use your words, tell me your words. Well, a lot of times they don't even know what the words are. And so, so now I've gone to saying things like, it sounds like you might be really angry. You're probably feeling angry right now, and that's okay. Or sad or whatever it might be. And so it's just kind of giving them the words and showing them how to express emotions in an appropriate way. And then another thing is really just knowing like the essence of parenting is looking through the lens of affirming and nurturing, guidance and limits. And so if you can kind of look through those three, that would be the goal. Kids also really thrive on consistency. So anytime you implement something new, there will probably be a period of like upset or it'll feel like this just isn't working. But if you really give it some time, like a really good amount of time to really see like, is what you're doing working? You don't want to just try something for a few days and then go, well, this isn't working. You actually want to I would try it for like a couple of weeks and see, is this really actually working? And so of course, children and emotions is such an important topic, and this would be a whole class in and of itself. But for the sake of time, I'm really just kind of skimming the surface. There is a really good podcast on this. It's about 2 hours long, but it's so worth the listen. And so, well, the podcast is called the Broken Brain Podcast, and it's episode number 69. And so in the end, in the resource section of this, I'll have that noted. But that's really a good listen if you're struggling in this area with kids and big emotions. So back to adults, some of the reasons we get emotionally stuck. Well, for one thing, it's just flat out uncomfortable having to feel harder feelings. And so as humans, we're really wired to avoid pain and suffering. And so it makes sense that we would want to emotionally detach from feelings like pain, shame, and guilt. And so a common defense is usually to stuff or ignore them. So people tend to do this by laughing about things that aren't funny, maybe using extreme sarcasm at inappropriate times, or if someone's a wall of words, that's usually detaching. In the moment, we might like clench our lips and hold our breath, and that's another way to just kind of like detach and ignore. And so, so usually, you know, again, like kind of knowing what's happening for us, we want to know when we're doing that. And then knowing when our emotions are overwhelming, it usually means that something from our past was triggered. And then I'll get into what triggers are in a second. And then the nervous system might not feel safe. And so our nervous systems, it's really our bodies are constantly scanning our environment, asking, is this safe or is this not safe? And of course, some things are obvious, like, you know, maybe you're walking down a dark alley at night, and of course your fight or flight response might kick in. But there's also subtle ways that our nervous systems get a little hijacked. So for example, if someone as a child may have tried to express themselves emotionally to a caregiver, and the child was constantly met with something along the lines of like, stop crying, or the classic big boys don't cry, or you're fine, you'll get over it, your nervous system is going to be conditioned to not feel safe. And so as an adult, you're probably not going to naturally feel safe expressing your emotions or being fully vulnerable with your spouse or other adults, because it just doesn't feel emotionally safe. And so the goal is noticing, does this happen for you? And I'm going to talk about our nervous systems in a second, but you know, the goal is to notice, does this happen to you? Do you feel safe or unsafe a lot? Or in certain situations. And then the goal is to widen that window of tolerance. And so, so again, like most people just detach from harder emotions. But when this happens, it's when the emotions get stuffed, ignored, or repressed, and they're going to store themselves somewhere, which we'll get into in a little bit. But one last thing I like to mention about getting emotionally stuck. This comes up a lot in marriages and in men in particular. Men were really socialized to not feel feelings. It's considered a sign of weakness, or it has been considered a sign of weakness. Men were usually taught to feel anger, rage, and withdrawal. And if you ask any guy, any adult guy right now, most would agree with that. And so for some men, learning the language of emotions like feeling pain, fear, and all of, you know, those harder ones is really like learning a whole new language. But the good news is that once you start to become consciously aware of your feelings and you learn how to express them, you can change that. You can really change anything. If you're motivated enough to change yourself, you do not have to live in a stuck emotionally or nervous system hijacked type of state. So conscious awareness will really help pull you out of that. So let's talk about, triggers. Okay, so triggers. We all get triggered. It's really that sudden whoosh of emotion that comes over us when someone says or does something right in front of us. We all get triggered multiple times a day. Sometimes they're really big, sometimes they're small. Our knee-jerk reaction is to typically shove the emotion down by getting mad or to blame the person who triggered us. So I do like to note that there are two different types of triggers. There's the emotional trigger, which is the wounded parts of us that need to be healed. And then there's an actual, like the trauma trigger, which, you know, could be classified as like post-traumatic stress disorder. For our purposes, I'm just going to be really talking about the emotional triggers. And so, you know, another thing about triggers is if you can shift your mindset into looking at triggers as truly a gift, showing us the parts of us that really need healing. So if you look at this diagram, when we get triggered, the shame core, the shame core is the part of us that develops when our brain is developing. And so usually from the ages of like 0 to about 26, our shame core is developing. And so we're usually going to have, you know, it's our unconscious. We're just not aware of it until it gets poked at. But there's really just messages in the unconscious like, I don't matter, or I only matter when I ... whatever that might be. Like, I only matter when I am useful to other people, or, you know, something like that. And so, so if someone pokes at that shame core trigger, part of the shame core for a minute will get like poked into our conscious mind, and we suddenly, for like a split second, might even remember something like I don't matter, but it's like it just gets poked into our conscious mind for a second. And so when we know this, it's like, oh, I got triggered. Well, what part of my shame core got poked at? And so, shame, of course, is so uncomfortable. Like shame is well, anytime we get triggered, our knee-jerk reaction is to shove that emotion down by getting mad or like acting in retaliation or blaming the other person. It usually feels really good to vent or complain about the person who wronged us, triggered us to our friends. But what's really happening is we're really just not feeling the shame that got triggered. So, again, as odd as it sounds, triggers really are a gift. They're uncomfortable, but if we flip our mindset into realizing it really is a gift, showing us the parts of ourselves that really need healing. So when you get triggered, and we'll go over this in a little bit more on how to manage triggers, but I mean, the gist of it is when we get triggered, if you're able to step outside the situation and ask yourself, what part needs to be healed? And so just for an example, a quick example, like if my friend threw a small party or gathering and I found out that I didn't get invited, my trigger on the surface might look like anger or irritation, like what? I can't even believe she didn't invite me. And then I'd probably tell my husband and a few friends about it. And then we'd all talk about like how wrong my friend was. And, it would just kind of go down this cycle. And then I might even think thoughts like, well, fine, I'm not going to invite her the next time, like I have something going on or that sort of thing. But instead, if I just look at the trigger, like what are the thoughts creating this trigger for me? I didn't get invited to this social gathering. I'm feeling really hurt. I feel forgotten, or I feel like I don't matter. I feel like maybe a little rejected. Those are all of the thoughts that come from our shame core, which to me, the shame core is really like all of the lies we bought into from childhood. It literally could be anything. It could be, like if I was 2 years old and I was crying and my parents didn't get to me fast enough, I'm going to have thoughts like, don't I matter? No one's coming. Of course, they're all unconscious. As a 2-year-old, I'm not literally thinking that. But my shame core is just storing that as information. So it's really just knowing, it could be anything. And so it's just digging into what really got poked at my shame core. When you shine a light and bring awareness to the shame core, you are actually healing it. The more light you can shine on shame, the smaller it gets and the less intense it feels. And so over and over and over, I've been doing this work for over 5 years now. When I get triggered, it is so much more manageable. My knee jerk finally is I really just look at what got triggered inside of me. I don't even think about the person that triggered me anymore. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think about it for maybe a few seconds, and then I just immediately look at like, well, what inside of me got triggered. And so it really does work. It takes a while, but it really does work. So next we're going to talk about our nervous systems. And so like I mentioned earlier, stuff of what's going on right now might be triggering something from our past. So like hearing about the coronavirus, being quarantined, all of that might be triggering something from our past. And so we might find our bodies reacting in an interesting or different way. And it could be due to past traumas, either big or little, or it could just be due to whatever going on right now. But for example, if you were in the hospital as a young child, or as a child, if you had a parent in the hospital, or if you were sick young, or you had a parent sick, all of these feelings could be getting triggered right now. So, or another example could be if you grew up with a lot of unknowns. Well, there's a lot of unknowns in society right now. And so that can be triggering and traumatizing. And so your body is going to react to, any of those emotions coming up to the surface, or any prior like little t traumas coming to the surface. You could be your body will be reacting to that. So basically, your body could be in a stressed or traumatized state for any reason. But back to our nervous systems, as humans, we come into this world as relational beings wired to connect. We want to feel safe in our bodies. We want to feel safe in our environments, in our relationships. We just want to feel safe. We're constantly scanning the surface. Am I safe? Or scanning our environments, like, am I safe or not? And so our autonomic nervous system is really like our personal surveillance system. Unconsciously and consciously, it's asking the question, is this safe? And the goal is protection. And so all of this, is usually happening like deep below our awareness. And so even right now, I mean, as humans, we like to make meaning of things. And so the unknown right now is, it especially just doesn't feel very safe to a lot of us. And so if you look at this diagram, this is from the polyvagal theory, which I'm really just skimming the very basic surface. So if you want to learn more about this, if you just Google the polyvagal theory, you'll get a ton of information. But basically imagine this ladder. And so at the top of the ladder is safety and connection. When we're in this state, our heart rate is regulated. We see the big picture. We connect to the world and people. It's safe and fun, hopeful and resourceful. We have a general feeling of regulation in our emotions. They feel manageable. And physically, this would look like good digestion, quality sleep, and an overall sense of just well-being. So then when you go into the middle, this is our sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response. So the middle, this is where fear is starting to whisper. And our heart rate might speed up. You might go into action and you're scanning for danger. Of course, this could be a spectrum. It could be like fear whispering, or it could be a full-on panic attack. So, I mean, it could be, it could be anything in the middle. But this can really look like, anxiety or anger, full-on panic attacks. It could be hard to sit still, hard to focus. You could feel like you're in distress. You're listening and looking for signs of danger. It could also feel a little chaotic. So physically, if you're in this state, you could have sleep problems, weight gain, headaches, chronic neck, shoulder, back tension, stomach problems, high blood pressure. And with all of that stress, you could be at an increased vulnerability to like an illness or any kind of illness. And so then at the bottom of the ladder, this is the parasympathetic part. And this is where you just kind of go into like shutdown or numb mode. In the animal world, like, I mean, if an animal's being chased, like if someone, a bigger animal's like, chasing a smaller one to like basically eat it for food, I mean, it really, like, that animal at some point might just stop and go into shock mode and freeze. And so what's happening is just like that parasympathetic is kicking in. And so, and so again, this would be like a spectrum. You full on shock mode would be, like the really extreme. And then a lighter end would just be like lethargic or apathy and things like that. But in this system, you feel small and silent. It feels alone or lonely, and like lonely where no one will ever find you. It's the path of last resort. When you feel trapped, the path could look like shutdown, collapse. It could even be dissociation, and dissociation on a smaller scale looks like if like if you're driving in your car and you go to the same, stops, or it kind of becomes automatic in a way. And, like you could get from point A to point B and go like, oh, I don't even remember, turning on the freeway or stuff like that. Like that could be a dissociation. Or if you're like watching TV and kind of numbing out, that could be considered dissociation too. So that could look like big or small. Also in this state, it might look like feelings of hopelessness, abandonment, foggy, like brain fog, too tired, no energy, Physically, it can look like fatigue, fibromyalgia, stomach problems, low blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and weight gain. And so again, like it's just looking at, am I kind of living in one of these systems? Of course, it would not be normal to live in safe and social all the time. And so you can look at like the safe social top of the ladder. You can think of that as like a safe, secure, warm embrace of the other two. So like a safe, secure, warm embrace of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. You know, because of course, like they say, you know, some anxiety is really good. Like if you're taking a test, you're going to want to have like some anxiety to wake your body up. Or some shutdown is kind of good for going into relax mode. It's just when you're living in these states, that's where problems come in. So you really want to notice under stress where your nervous system is at. And the thing is, this can look like a really big event or really small. So like another example, if I walk into a social gathering where I don't know many people, unconsciously, I'm scanning the environment to see, is this safe? And I might even be thinking like, I don't know very many people, but unconsciously I'm kind of thinking like, do they look friendly? Is this a crowd I can see myself fitting in with? Is there a friendly face around here I can find, and those sorts of things. So that's when my like fight or flight system is getting a little bit activated. The other end, like I've seen this with couples where, like when couples get really, you know, irritated with each other, one spouse might give the other one an eye roll. That eye roll alone can trigger shutdown. Like it just immediately goes to shutdown. And so, so it doesn't have to be like a gigantic event. It can be, you know, like an eye roll from a spouse, which isn't, I mean, eye rolls aren't okay. Like that's showing contempt. So, but it's just showing how something little can really shut down a person. And you can live in these states for a really long time. So again, of course, the goal is conscious awareness. If you find yourselves in one of these states, you can regulate your nervous system. So this can totally be changed. It's, you know, just knowing what to do. If you're in the sympathetic fight or flight, any kind of movement will be helpful, like dance, exercise, running. Funny enough, a little trick is if you're in fight or flight, running, going out for a run, actually tricks your brain into thinking you're running away. And so then your brain starts to feel better, like you're getting away. If you're in the shutdown parasympathetic, lighter things like getting outside, getting into nature, going for a walk outside, that can help raise your, like raise you up a little bit. Texting a friend can help. Texting versus talking. Calling someone on the phone might not help, but texting actually helps because you're making some contact with people. Things like a weighted blanket, writing, deep breathing. Cold showers really help, or like splashing cold water on your face, that can really help. And then audiobooks can help too, because you're like listening to someone. So it's again, sort of making some contact, not being so alone, but you know, those are some things that can help regulate your nervous system. So now let's get into the fun part, which is why essential oils. And so you know, so that was like all the information, all the emotional information. Now, why essential oils and how can they help? So when talking about emotions, excuse me, when talking about emotions, we must mention the limbic system, which is the part of our brain. It's the part of our brain. It's a system of nerves and networks that control basic emotions and drives. Really, the limbic system is just the emotional part of our brain. So essential oils can, I should say our sense of smell is the only one of the 5 senses that can activate our limbic system. So essential oils can be used to tap directly into the limbic system to stimulate our memories and emotions. So as you inhale essential oils, tiny molecules enter the nasal cavity, pass by the olfactory bulb, which is in our nose. The olfactory bulb is also a part of our limbic system. And so our response to an aroma is going to be emotional before it can be rational. So it's really cool because it means you can use essential oils to recall memories, both good and bad. And if they're bad, you can use oils to help you release cellular memories that are stored in the body. And so this allows you to process and move past. And so, which is also releasing emotions. So when we regularly come in contact with reactions to smells, or I'm sorry, we all regularly come in contact with reaction to smells. And so as we walk into like our house at dinner time, you might smell your favorite meal being prepared, and then your emotions are going to instantly be triggered to like fond memories and that you have of that meal, and you might feel joy. You could smell the cologne your grandfather used to wear, and it instantly triggers emotions based on that relationship. So if you had a good relationship, you're probably going to feel joy and love. If you had a bad relationship, or if he maybe passed away, you might feel feelings like anger or sadness. And so I also need to mention quick that the only essential oils I am talking about today, and the only oils I really stand behind knowing they work, are Young Living. And I know that because, well, I use them and I've seen them work. And I've also visited their farms, which is super fascinating and cool. But I know how pure their oils are. And so I also know how intricate their distillation practices are, which is also so important for getting like the right exact formulation in place, especially if you're using essential oils to support yourself physically or emotionally. And so if you want more information on that, just visit seedtoseal.com, and there's a ton of information about that. But I just wanted to note that the only oils I'm talking about is Young Living. If you do this with other oils, they probably won't work, to be honest, or who knows if they'll work. But yeah, anyway, just putting that out there. So next, we're going to talk about frequencies, and you know, because just to show how essential oils can be helpful. So every living thing has a frequency or an energy, and that includes essential oils. Frequencies can be measured. So if you take a look, a healthy person is going to have a frequency of around 62 to 72 megahertz. Flu symptoms are going to start at 57, death begins at 25, and negative thoughts can lower your frequency by up to 12, while positive thoughts can increase the frequency by 10. Prayer and meditation can increase by 15. And so it's just kind of showing like how, I mean, your body's going to adjust or, you know, move up and down, of course, day to day, but things like fresh food, fresh herbs, they have 20 to 27 megahertz. Dry foods and dried herbs have 15 to 22 megahertz, but processed and canned foods have 0. So it's, you know, again, just like showing what you put into your body. Are you putting life in or not, essentially? And so essential oils start at 52. And I just realized I don't have how high they go, but I meant to put that in. But they start at 52. I believe they go as high, I feel like it was in the 400s, 320 for sure. I feel like it could be higher. But anyway, they go really high. So using essential oils while like diffusing, inhaling, or like putting on your body, they'll really boost your frequencies in your body. And so another thing is our emotions also have frequencies. And so this is not meant to stress anyone out. Like, we all feel the negative emotions. All of us feel it. We feel it a lot. And so it's not to stress anyone out like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling shame, and I know this is a lower frequency, and so now I really need to get to the higher frequency. You know, because then if we if we get stressed out about it, we might just shove it aside and like immediately try to minimize or go to the positive. So this isn't meant to like be a bad thing. It's just meant to show how our emotions can affect our health. And just knowing like another good reason to release some of these negative emotions, like just to show how important it is to release. And so again, you know, just showing how essential oils work at raising frequencies, how they can affect our emotions in another way. And so now we are going to get into the actual oils. So the grounding oils, these are going to be frankincense, citrus fresh, and raven. And these oils are going to promote mindfulness, stability, security, movement. You can use during times of grief or sadness. And this will also help these will help your parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous systems. Whoops. Okay, next is the calming oils. And these are going to be like lavender, stress away, valor, and peace and calming. And so these oils are going to soothe stress and tension. They're going to promote feelings of security, especially if you have like abandonment as a root issue. They're also going to promote like relaxation and sleep. And these are going to be really good to use for your sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight. Then we're going to move into some energizing oils. Lemon, peppermint, and panaway are going to be really good at promoting feelings of energy. They're going to encourage motivation. It'll help encourage you to like face your fears or feel your feelings. And then these are going to be really good for the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the, you know, like in that shutdown mode. So if you're feeling like you're in that mode, use these oils to help support, kind of bringing you out of that. Then there are oils you can use to take internally. And so Young Living has a line of vitality oils that you can use to actually take internally. And so a healthy gut and a healthy immune system will also equal healthy emotions. And so these oils will support your gut health. It'll support your stomach or digestion. It'll encourage it'll help support your immune system. And so all of those are just really good to take internally. You can help your emotions as well. Oops. Oh, there we go. I thought I skipped one on accident. So I also want to mention lavender and cedarwood. I think cedarwood is one of the coolest oils. And part of that is because it really can help support sleep. So if you diffuse lavender and cedarwood together, that is really good for, like if you diffuse that all night while you sleep, that will help support sleep. Cedarwood in particular is high in sesquiterpenes, which is really just a component of what makes the oil. So sesquiterpenes will help serve to oxygenate the brain through the limbic system. And we'll get into more of that later, like why that's important, but just know that cedarwood is like really good for that. And then we're gonna go into some other oils. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Release essential oil. If you're more prone to like anger, resentment, irritation, release would be really good at supporting those emotions. You actually want to, you could put a couple drops of that on your liver every day. And we'll get to that in a minute, but you know, a lot of emotions are stored in your liver. And so release can kind of help if you put, you know, just drop that on your liver. You can take deep breaths as you're doing it and just, you know, like slowly inhale to, it really releases just a good one if you're kind of prone to like anger, frustration, resentment, and that sort of thing. And then Valor and White Angelica, using these together on your body is a really cool combination. It really allows the energy to kind of flow through your body. These two will promote love and joy. If you're kind of more prone to being fearful, these are two really good ones to use as well. Okay, and then Hope, Joy, and Transformation essential oils. This is really good for to use during times of sadness or if you're feeling hopeless. And so I do want to pause here for a second and talk about grief, because right now a lot of us are grieving. And as a society, there's just a lot of grief in the air right now. And so what we could be feeling right now is like an anticipatory grief, which is a lot about the uncertainty of what the future holds. So the uncertainty feels like something bad is going to happen, and it breaks our sense of safety. And so this type of grieving could also be called anxiety, but it really is like, you know, a kind of a heavier anxiety or a different anxiety, because there's just a really big edge of uncertainty. And so right now we might jump to worst case scenarios and fixate on those. And so the goal though is to find balance. You don't want to shove worst case scenarios aside, but you don't want to make them the focal point either. And so it's just kind of knowing, you know, how can I kind of find a middle ground with this? So when you think about grief, the stages of grief are not linear. They really are going to flow in like a circular way, kind of like water going down a drain when it makes that little like tornado looking thing. It's kind of like thinking of grief in that way. The stages are just going to be circular, and eventually they'll feel less intense, but or eventually like that circle will get smaller. But looking at the stages, it's really you know, kind of looking at like denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and then acceptance. And so acceptance is really excuse me, looking at like, you know, this happened and now I have to figure out what to do. Acceptance can help us kind of find our sense of control again, or it feels like we have more control when we get into acceptance, because it's like, this happened and now what do I do about this? If you find yourself, you know, like if your anxiety is really kind of getting the best of you, to calm yourself and bring yourself back to the present moment, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what do I know to be true in this moment? And so, so just in general, like if you find yourself feeling a lot of different things right now, you might be grieving. There's a lot of change happening and things will be different. Change and transitions can be scary because it's that middle of here's where I was, here's where I am, and where am I going now? So that's like the transition. And it's really just, again, acknowledging and bringing that to the surface of knowing this really is just going to be hard right now. And then getting to that acceptance point of this is what's happening and now what am I going to do about it? Anxiety likes to fill in the blanks with information that we don't know. And so knowing that can be helpful. It's like, that's why the pausing and what do I know to be true in this moment can help kind of manage those like catastrophic thoughts. So another thing to notice is just if you look at, you know, what is all the information I'm taking in? Am I watching the news too much? Am I reading things? Am I looking at articles? Am I listening to things too much? Like, do I need to take a break? As humans, we like to make meaning of things. So Of course, it's like the more we can get information, the more we know, the safer it feels. But you really want to look at, am I watching, listening, reading things too much as a way to try to control or manage my emotions? Because if I can manage my emotions with information, that feels good, but then we're constantly in that cycle of doing that. So basically you just want to look at, am I trying to manage or control my emotions with information or with knowing, or do I really just want the information because I'm interested? So you kind of just want to notice, why you're wanting information, and do you need a break? So the next thing would be looking at like present time and harmony. Those are really good oils to like support your spiritual body. It helps to release emotions from like all areas of the body, because when you're consciously living in the present moment, you can release the past. And so again, that's why even multiple times a day, just asking yourself, if you notice your emotions, kind of going a little bit, or feeling a little bit overwhelming, just pause and ask yourself. And, present time, I love that oil. It's just asking yourself, what is true in this moment? So lastly, or I shouldn't say lastly, I have a few more things, but but kind of a summary of the things we've talked about. Why is this all important? So really, just to sum up, like when we push away, bury our feelings, or ignore them, they won't go away. If your feelings are not released, they're going to stay in your body, and then your physical health is going to be affected. And then the other, like the harsh truth is, what we don't heal will be passed on to our kids, because that's just how the generational system works. So feeling your feelings, acknowledging them, and releasing them will also feel so much better in the long run. And then another thing to note is that no one can make us feel a certain way. It's really important to notice our thoughts are going to create our emotions. So if we're feeling something, really just pausing and going, what is my thought right now creating this emotion? And that can be really insightful. And then when I mentioned like the physical stuff, so Harvard studies have shown that an estimated of 90% of all physical problems have psychological roots. So another reason it's so important to release these emotions. So the stored feelings, the feelings that we don't release, they can show up in these areas. So like if anger will show up in the liver. So symptoms you're going to want to look for are like headaches, skin conditions, easily irritated, sluggish, and low energy. And then grief is going to show up in the lungs. And so, just there are some, symptoms to look for. This is kind of interesting because when, like I know a lot of people who have traveled, and so it's just interesting how often this happens. But like if you have kids at home and you're traveling, your child might suddenly develop like a respiratory something going on when you go out of town. And so really it's probably just them grieving the fact that you're traveling for a little bit. So it's just kind of interesting to notice if you're feeling things physically, it does the emotion kind of match up. So, worry in the stomach, stress would be in the heart and brain, and then fear would be stored in the kidneys. And so how all of this works is that when we have an experience in life that hurts, we, of course, will want to detach from it. And like I mentioned, we'll do that by clamping our lips, holding our breath, taking short breaths. Basically, you're not really like oxygenating your body by not like fully breathing through. So what happens is these suppressed feelings. Oh, and I should mention, like we do that without even knowing. Like we do all of that. We detach without even knowing. So again, like just bringing the conscious awareness. But when we suppress feelings, we will store them in the form in our body. What's happening is like these hard crystals are forming throughout various cells and tissues and organs in our body. So these crystals then prevent oxygen from getting to various parts of our body. And this eventually will cause discomfort and disease. So we need to get rid of the crystals so that oxygen can restore our bodies back to health. One way to get oxygen is essential oils, like when I mentioned cedarwood. Frequency, raising our frequency, and oxygen are both really important factors in healing. So now you know why you need to release emotions, you know how essential oils can help. So in this very last part, I'm going to go over a few practical tools or skills you can use at releasing emotions. So just a few really quick tips. Deep belly breaths, inhaling, a deep inhale, kind of like a balloon is filling your stomach up with air. That will help release. So it's like that deep inhale, long exhale. The other is in moments of overwhelm, or when you notice anxiety, filling in the blanks with information you don't know, pause and ask yourself, what is true in this moment? And then, of course, regulating our nervous system, noticing, like, am I in fight or flight? Am I in shutdown? And then, fight or flight is you're gonna want movement with fight or flight. With shutdown, you're gonna wanna wake yourself up somehow with like cold showers, getting out into nature, that deep breathing, all of that will help. And then, of course, sleep and nutrition are going to play a role in emotions. And really good sleep hygiene is, kind of a routine, like no TV or phone or computer or any electronics for at least an hour before bed. And then about 20 minutes before going to bed, do something calming like reading, deep breathing, prayer, meditation, anything to help calm your mind. And just use lavender and cedarwood because it's super amazing. So proper nutrition, it's like supplements, physical health, exercise, foods that will really the higher frequency foods that will give us life. Really, nutrition is a whole other class on its own. So of course, I'm just briefly mentioning that of course is an important factor. And then there are types of therapy called like somatic therapy, which is like EMDR or somatic experiencing. Those two techniques are really good at kind of just getting at your body. It's a little different than talk therapy, but it really is, it's really helping you tap into more of like what's going on in your body. I guess that would be like a really quick version to say that, but you can Google those techniques and just kind of see what they do. But those are two really good types of therapy if you notice yourself really struggling in this area and like really needing some release or really needing some, if you know you've had like bigger traumas, those two therapies can really help. And then of course, essential oils. With essential oils, consistently using them is what's going to help. You don't want to just like use them once or twice, but over time, consistently using them over time, you will see changes. And so now I'm going to get into just a few of the tools we can use. So first, this would be the first one. If you have a harder time noticing your feelings, this would be the first one to do. You're going to want to do a feelings check exercise, which is really taking a moment. You freeze what you're doing or thinking, and you can do this throughout the day. You just, in certain moments throughout the day, just pause and ask yourself, like, what am I feeling right now in this second? And so, for example, let's just say like right now I'm on my way to catch a plane to do a presentation in Chicago. I'm going to pause. I feel some fear that I'll be late for the plane, some joy or excitement about the trip and hanging out with my colleagues. I also feel pain and guilt about leaving my family. And I also feel a little anger at Bill for not finishing all of the graphics until the last minute. So you just like throughout the day want to pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling in this moment? The next thing is managing your triggers. So when you get triggered, you can journal about this or just note what it was that happened. What did you feel in your body? What were any physical sensations that came up? What thoughts did you have? Is this an old feeling from long ago, or is this a newer feeling? Notice your feelings, thoughts, physical sensations. If you notice all of that, and then let your mind scan back to an earlier time you felt that same way. that could bring some insight into where that trigger came from, or like what event may have triggered that. And so again, that just kind of brings some insight into why you got triggered and what triggers need to be healed. Another thing is the future self journal. This is a template, and this is, if you can do this every day, this will also help bring conscious awareness. So the first step, and this you can just use as a template. So every morning you would journal, like the first step would be self-awareness. What behavior or pattern do I want to change? And you focus on just one. And then you can write some affirmations or statements that will help you achieve this. Then you can write, how will you be able to practice these new behaviors in daily life? And then the step 2 would be, just writing down like a daily affirmation or mantra or something like, today I will focus on shifting the pattern of whatever it is you want to shift. And then write what you're grateful for. And then you can write like 3 traits that your future self will have. So, and of course it would just line up with what you're wanting to shift the pattern of. Like today I'm going to shift my pattern of being boundaryless. I'm going to say, no when I mean no. So 3 traits my future self will have would be like maybe assertiveness, self-confidence, and saying no, and like whatever else. And then the person I'm becoming will experience more. And you just kind of notice what that would feel like, and you write that down. And then think about, like, I have an opportunity to be my future self today when happens. And then when I think about who I'm becoming, I feel whatever it is that you would be feeling. So that would just be a good, like that can really be helpful in building that, or bringing that conscious awareness to the surface. So next, oops, I skipped a few. Okay, here we go. Okay, next would be the downward arrow technique. I like this one for just like quick things, but this is a technique to help you uncover like the implications of a thought. So you can ask yourself, like whatever the thought is, you would just ask yourself, what would this mean if? What would it mean if this were, or what if it is true that ... What about that bothers you? And you keep doing that until you get to the root of a negative thought. So for example, I'm worried about this exam that I need to take. What about this bothers me? I might fail. What if this were true? Everyone would laugh at me. What about that bothers me? Well, then I'd feel like a failure. I'd be a failure. And what would that mean if you were a failure? So then you'd want to challenge that negative thought. And it'd be like, well, I feel bad. And then you would ask yourself, is that true? Like, would this truly make me a failure? So you're kind of just, slowly uncovering, asking yourself any of those 3 questions, trying to get to the root of a thought. And then whatever that thought is, like if it is something like I don't matter, or I'm a failure, or, something like that, then you would want to just do the opposite and go, like, no, this would not make me a failure. I like kind of what is true in this moment. That would not make me a failure, failing at an exam. So, doing a technique like that can kind of help. And then there's a little technique you can use with essential oils, which is called the Aroma Freedom Reset, and it's taking lavender, frankincense, and stress away. You can actually pre-mix equal parts of that in a bottle and carry it with you. But if you have a situation that comes up, or if you think of a situation that feels like overwhelming, frustrating, or confusing, you would name what the feeling is using an actual feeling word. And then you would locate where you're feeling that in your body. And then you would ask yourself, like, what is the negative voice telling me that this isn't, that this is true? And so you're kind of, listening for that deep, like, internal thought, telling you, or just that deep negative thought that those feelings, or that's creating those feelings. So then when you have all of that, you're going to want to put a drop or 2 of that blend, which is those equal parts of those 3 oils, in the palm of your hand, and inhale just keep inhaling those oils while you're focusing on the memory, the feeling, the body sensation, and the thought. And then keep doing that until you notice a shift or like a new mindset emerging. And it's really cool. Like it's just a really cool, quick process in the moment to just like help kind of clear out and release some emotions. And then just in general, there's a quick emotional release hack, which is, it's really, this is kind of a repeat of everything I've already mentioned, but you're noticing the thoughts, creating the emotion, you notice where you're feeling it in your body, and then you can set an intention, which is usually the opposite of a negative thought. So like, if you're feeling feelings, you're feeling things in your body, and the thought is like, I'm not good enough, or just something like that, like I'm not good enough or I don't matter. You would shift that to I am good the way I am, or I do matter. And you say that out loud while you inhale the essential oil. And as you're inhaling that oil, imagine the negative feelings and beliefs and body sensations leaving your body. And you can actually even imagine, like, when I say I do matter, what does that actually feel like? So you're kind of like inhaling like the essential oil as you literally feel what that might feel like to say I do matter, or I am safe, or whatever the statement is. And then just keep repeating that until you feel a shift in your body. So lastly, how on earth, I know you're asking yourself, how on earth do I get my hands on these oils? If you don't have oils already, you're probably wondering, how do I get my hands on these? And so most of the oils that I mentioned actually come in this like beginner's box. It's 13 oils plus a diffuser, all of that for $165. It's the most discounted. It's a beginner's box, so it's just like the most discounted. It's like the everyday oils you use. When you go that route, you would also get 24% off of any future orders. Like cedarwood's not included in here, so you definitely want to buy cedarwood. So you would, you'd get discounts on any future orders. So if someone invited you to this class, just talk to them about how you would get your hands on these. If no one invited you, or if I invited you, just send me a message, and then we can help, I can help walk you through that process. And then, so references, like a lot of the references I use, or like some of the recommended reading, they're all listed here. The bulk of what I talked about with emotions comes from a lot of my training, which is the book Facing Codependence by Pia Mellody. The bulk of it is like under her training. But anyway, these are just all the books that I would highly recommend. And then there are some parenting. Sorry, my slides are being super slow right now. Oh, there we go. Parenting resources. So there's a book called Parenting Scripts, and this is a really good book. So it's common situations that come up. So like when what you're saying isn't working, say something new. And so this book, it's not a book you would like read fully. It's really just looking at what situation am I struggling with? And you just read that section of the book, which is like a page or two. And it really just kind of talks about like, here's what you're doing and do this instead. So that's a really cool book. And then Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child by John Gottman is really good. No Drama Disciplines, also really good. And then that podcast that I mentioned, which is from the Broken Brain podcast, episode number 69 on mirror neurons, empathy, and connected parenting. That's a really good podcast to use or to listen to if you're struggling with just like big emotions in your kids. So then lastly, and I promise this is the last one, so thank you for making it this far. But I have a few downloads if you're interested. I have a short ebook on marriage skills and essential oils. So kind of like what I talked about, but more of the marriage focus. And you can download that book for free at just bit.ly/marriage sense ebook. And then the emotional chart that I used, at the beginning. You can download that at just go to bit.ly/oils and emotions to get that chart. And then if you have any questions that come up, there's my email address, and then my Instagram handle is at Healthy Sense, where I like to try to post just information about oils and emotions. So you can feel free to follow me there for more information. And that's it. So thank you for making it this far, and thank you so much for watching.